Hello, welcome back to Learn from a Layman. I'm Carl Christensen, joined this evening by Cameron Christensen and Tim. I want my logic back, Cox.
I like that actually. It just about the right level of unhinged for me.
Yeah.
Who
Well,
stole your sanity, Tim? Who stole it?
okay. Well, logic being the theme, one of the kind of themes of tonight's podcast, we're going to be discussing logical razors or philosophical razors. And so if you're not familiar with what those are, we'll cover that as well. But wanted to start off with just so philosophy is a very broad subject, and we might eventually do kind of a philosophy 101 type of introduction. Philosophy was the class I did the worst in college. Tim can attest that went poorly, given that we had plans. Yes, it was anyway. But we're going to be discussing a specific part of just kind of logic tonight, and that's a razor. And you've heard of these before, even if you don't know that you've heard of them. And one of them, I'm sure that everyone's familiar with, is Occam's Razor. And that's if you don't know the name, you've certainly heard the principle before. So, Tim, do you remember what Occam's Razor is?
Yes, the simplest beard is the best looking beard.
I don't remember that version of this.
oh, sorry, that was a Gillette ad. Never mind. Okay.
Oh my
gosh. No, isn't it something along the lines of the simplest explanation is most likely the best explanation?
Right, exactly. Yeah, and so that's probably the most well-known explanation of Occam's razor. Simpler explanations are more likely to be correct, avoid unnecessary and improbable assumptions. And so that kind of gives you an idea of what razors are used for in general. They're kind of the rules of thumb, allows you to figure out what might be an explanation for anything in the field of logic. So allows you to eliminate unlikely explanations and avoid unnecessary actions, is what the definition is. So these are not like watertight rules, right? Sometimes calculus really is the answer, not algebra. So it's not the case that you can always just say, okay, well, just because this is the simplest explanation, it's correct. It might not cover all the cases, anyway, these are rules of thumb. These are kind of generic rules in order to best be able to move through a large series and set of information well and efficiently. So Occam's razor was originally stated, or one of the very frequent ways it's stated is entities should not be multiplied without necessity. And that more colloquially and for the layman is like what Tim said, just the simplest explanation usually wins. And so there's been a lot of scenarios where that comes up in real life, where you just want you want the simple. You don't want to make things overly complicated. And there's kind of a bunch of the razors that we're going to talk about here in a minute are different kind of takes on Occam's razor, or at least have different implications based on what Occam's razor is. So it's kind of a good starting place for understanding this philosophical razor. Let's look at another razor, and this one's Occam's duct tape. Anything that has the name duct tape in it is truly, obviously worth discussing. This one, it says, is the opposite of Occam's razor, which is when someone approaches a problem with a ridiculously large number of assumptions. And so this is something you want to avoid. But yeah, so you don't go into an argument assuming a lot of things. You go in with kind of some base assumptions and what is the word I'm looking for? Maxims and or axioms. You're trying to go for some very basic assumptions when you go into a logical situation, so that you don't come in with all of these preconceived notions of what you're dealing with. Any questions about either one of those?
Not yet.
Okay.
I don't even have anything clever or fake clever to say. Darn it.
We're going to go with one of my personal favorites. This one's Hanlon's Razor. Tim or Cameron, have you ever heard of Hanlon's Razor?
Nope.
All right. Well, perfect.
Yes, because I Googled a bunch of razors before this podcast.
Perfect. This is one I'd heard of before as well, and it's one of the ones I heard it a few years ago, and it really is very apropos of a lot of things that happen in life. Probably one of my favorite ones, and ones I apply on a day-to-day basis. It says Hanlon's Razor is never attribute to malice that which can adequately be explained by incompetence or stupidity.
I like how that's a zinger as well as a razor.
I mean, it's really so relevant. I mean, so, when you go into any situation in life, it's really, I think we've dealt with this, I think when we talked on the hotels podcast, Cameron, when we were talking about your interactions with people at the hotel, right? When someone's yelling at you over the phone, because their water is not hot or something's wrong with their room, right, Cameron? You could assume that they're doing it because they're just a bad person, right? They have malice in their heart. Or it can just be that they're incompetent or stupid. And so you want to kind of default to they're not really, they're not going out of their way to be mean. They're just incompetent and or incapable, and therefore this is the result of that. Lots of situations you can imagine in the world of politics that are relevant. We don't get very political on this podcast, so don't worry. We're not going to give examples, not in that realm at least. But I'd imagine Tim has some examples of this in class as well.
Oh, sure. I think anytime you're interacting with people, you invariably, what's the word? You grate on each other. You rub each other wrong. And I frankly can think of times where I myself have done things that have surely bothered people. As this razor says, with no malice intended, I just made a mistake, or didn't consider or realize something until afterwards. So, yeah, I think that you made me think of another. I guess it's not exactly the same, but a variation. But only a fool takes offense where none was intended. And I suppose those two could be put together, where our initial assumption, our default assumption is no offense. What offense was intended, and I think applying that even when it seems pretty clear that offense was intended actually can help to defuse and detoxify bad situations. I find that when you treat with kindness someone who was trying to treat you with malice, you can often undo their anger and start a new start a new stage in the relationship. So it's almost like even you almost don't need this razor. You just automatically assume that even if it can't be attributed to incompetence or neglect, what was the other one? Incompetence or
stupidity?
Or stupidity. So even if it can't be attributed to incompetence or stupidity, if you still give benefit of the doubt and respond that way anyways, it's just better for you. Things work out better for you in the long run.
Yeah, it's really kind of I think a lot of us get in this mindset of either a book or a movie where there's a bad guy, right? There's this whole plot, and we're the center of the plot, and therefore anything that happens on our road, Back to the Future, the whatever they are, I don't remember what country they're from, that gunned down Dr. Brown and are trying to steal the uranium. Like they're acting in malice, and we are at the center of this, and everyone that that gets in our way or causes a problem is acting in malice, because this is a plot. This is a whole thread of our novel, as opposed to our movie, as opposed to us just being one of the people that show up at the mall at that night, when Dr. Brown gets gunned down, and they happen to also have a good reason for gunning him down. Anyway, not even necessarily a good reason, but just like this is, they're stupid. They don't realize things. They don't, this is, it can be explained by something else better than it can be explained by malice. The only way you can kind of give it that explanation is to create a very egocentric, self-centric picture of what's going on in the world. And so Hanlon's razor never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by incompetence or stupidity. Kind of moves you away from this picture of where it's an egocentric world, and everyone that gets in your way is purposefully trying to do it to you, or purposely trying to cause a problem in the world, as opposed to just ill-informed, otherwise incapable. And you don't want to go around thinking of everyone as stupid, but it does help, like Tim said, just to go around with a little bit of the benefit of the doubt for everyone else. So,
and incidentally, we would appreciate it if you would apply Hanlon's razor to our podcast.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, going back, I've listened to some of our prior podcasts, and it really is not malice when we tell you things that are, only, I wouldn't say untrue, because we try really hard to make sure that they're accurate. But real life gets messy.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
My problem is that I always think everyone is equally as smart as I am.
Right. Which can work with Hanlon's razor as well, if you attribute to yourself incompetence and stupidity.
So if I believe I'm stupid and incompetent, then it works out just fine.
It works out, yep. If I don't understand it, that means nobody understands it. Also, the pretense for learn it from a layman. What was that, Cameron?
It's because you're stupid and incompetent. That's why.
Exactly. I take that as when people tell me I'm stupid and incompetent, I just assume they're applying Hanlon's razor, and I say thank you for being patient. No, I do think Hanlon's razor is a good example of just the simplest explanation wins. So Occam's razor leads to Hanlon's razor in my mind, because Occam's razor, the simplest explanation, trying to build up a world where malice is the real reason that people do a lot of things as opposed to just incompetence, is much more complicated. It is that novel, like I said, or that movie script where you have to build up this whole storyline in order to get an action that can be viewed as a malicious action, as opposed to, oh yeah, they just didn't understand that one thing and therefore everything else. So.
And one note on that, I think we would all do well to recognize that we are more inclined to apply this razor to those within our group, within our tribe, than to those outside of it. So I'll just give a generalized example. Let's say I'm the member of a political party, and let's say a leader who I've voted for or whatever in my party is embroiled in some scandal or whatever. Well, I'm more inclined to not to give the benefit of the doubt to that person. Let's say a leader in an opposing party is embroiled in a scandal. I'm much less likely to. I'm going to tend to attribute that more to malice or whatever. I see that happening even just in the politics of my home state. It's interesting to watch the ways that people respond to similar situations applied in one party versus the other. And as the wise sage and philosopher Dave Barry once noted,
Barry.
Dr.
Barry, I guess is
Dr. That's right. It's if you're not familiar with Dave Barry, go and read some of his stuff. He's great. But anyways, Dave Barry once noted that at an election where the parties changed power, he said they all had to go and trade cue cards so that they could immediately start using the lines that the previous party had been using. They just switch, because you're always going to say the same kinds of things about your party and about the other.
Right.
Anyways.
Right. Okay. Quick recap. We've only gone over 3, so not a lot to recap, but I did want to mention, so Occams Razor, simplest explanation. I guess there's a couple other ones that might be familiar. I also looked up and wanted to say those. It's when you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. That's Arthur Conan Doyle and Sherlock Holmes. So that's a kind of a restatement of Occam's Razor. And then Albert Einstein said things should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler. So you need to satisfy all available evidence. That's Occam's Razor. We've gone over that. Now, we had Occam's duct tape, or I guess that's also referred to as Occam's crazy glue or Occam's stapler. That one's I didn't mention before. I did mention that's one you want to avoid. That's just an ironic one. It's like it's like I said, the opposite of Occam's Razor. Don't make unnecessary and useless assumptions, or do if you want to make a point. Essentially, make a whole bunch of unnecessary and useless assumptions, and that's kind of the point there. And then we just went over Hanlon's razor. So. Moving on now, we're going to go to the Sagan Standard. This is one I was not familiar with in name, but I was familiar with in principle, or the statement of it is extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. I guess this is kind of like Uncle Ben, with great power comes great responsibility. Did he say that?
Yes.
Okay. So I mean, that's obviously pretty self-explanatory. If someone claims, this is the example that I looked up, if someone claims that their shaman, their religious teacher or whatever can contact the dead, see the future, read minds, then they have to back it up by extraordinary evidence, live demonstration, for example. You need to be able to, in this world of logic and empirical evidence, you need to be able to verify. And so if you're making some extraordinary claim about, say, for example, you're saying that I did cold fusion. Let's say I'm the University of Utah, and I claim that I could do cold fusion. This may or may not have happened. It actually absolutely did happen. They claimed that they had these test results that showed that they were able to produce cold fusion that netted a large amount of energy, and then it came to be found that was untrue. That it was just, from what I remember, it was just a bad reading or something along those lines. But unfortunately, it made it to the press before they had verified it. And so when you make an extraordinary claim like that, have extraordinary evidence available to you straight away. Any examples, Tim? Any comments, or Cameron?
Cameron, you go.
I was going to say, unfortunately, when Carl said Uncle Ben, I thought of Rice instead of Spider-Man, which makes me feel really silly right now.
Of Rice?
It's a Rice brand.
Uncle Ben's.
My word.
Well, Cameron, you are a chef, so.
Wow, I felt really. I feel that my geek card has to be returned for a brief moment. I totally agree with that, because I mean, if you're saying something, you got to be able to back it up. You got to have all that evidence and that everything, because I mean, it goes along with a couple other razors that I'm sure we'll talk about. But yeah, you have to have the evidence to to back it up, or it kind of, I think, leads into the.
So there is one that's similar. Let me hit that one for you. I think it's Hume. I think it's pronounced Hume. Hume's Razor. David Hume. By the way, that one Sagan's Standard is from Carl Sagan. I'm assuming Sagan.
Okay, I don't know.
Sagan.
Sagan?
I will give you the caveat that all of these pronunciations are either informed from a philosophy class that I took 20 years ago, or just my layman inability to pronounce anything that is not a Danish or English name. So, or Dutch, actually. Come to think of it, I can pronounce some Dutch names if I know that they're Dutch beforehand. Hume's Razor, related to, in my mind at least, related somewhat to Sagan's Standard. If the cause assigned for any effect be not sufficient to produce it, we must either reject that cause or add to it such qualities as will give it a just proportion to the effect. So essentially, you can't attribute to some event a bunch of effects that can't logically be assigned to that cause, right? Like Tim sneezed and therefore I tripped. Are those things related? No, right? That there's not sufficient evidence to assume that there's anything related. Tim sneezed and my house fell over. Anything along those lines. But that's a really random example.
That seems to be the counterpart of a logical fallacy, right? So not applying that is, or the opposite of that is a logical fallacy, where we assume causation due to association, or
right.
Is there a logical fallacy? What's that one called?
Yeah, well, they can go back and listen to our logical fallacies episode if they want to listen.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you'll have to go find out.
That's right. We do have a logical fallacy episode, and there are there's a lot of overlap. These are kind of restatements of rules of thumb as opposed to, pointing out particular fallacious logical methods of coming up with an argument. So, but yeah, this is. The slight gust of wind isn't enough to cause a Boeing 747 to crash. Fallen power line isn't enough to cause a nationwide blackout. And like I said, Tim sneezing probably didn't kill my guinea pig. Wait,
go ahead.
Did you?
The butterfly effect, Carl. Butterfly effect.
That's right. Tim.
That's the butterfly razor.
Okay. So yeah, you can't assign something, and those are all silly examples, right? But there are frequent examples in the real world where this does happen. Something small, ergo something large, but it doesn't follow, right? And so you need to be. So Hanlon's Razor is make sure that you're only assigning to effects to something that can actually explain those effects. Okay, let's hit a couple more here. We've got Hitchens Razor now. This is from Christopher Hitchens. What can be asserted without evidence can also be dismissed without evidence. So this is so while those little names I give Tim at the beginning of every episode, Tim can dismiss those without evidence.
That's
because
right.
they are asserted without evidence. Yeah, I mean, this happens all the time, right? If somebody calls you a name without, or attributes something to you that's unfair, then you can dismiss it with no evidence. Just saying there's no reason for them to call you racist, for example. You can just dismiss it. Say that is absolutely untrue. Move on. You don't need to bring up evidence when no evidence has been introduced to begin with. So if you need to introduce something, you need to begin with evidence, and that's kind of Hitchens Razor. A couple other examples they came up with in this article that I looked up. It said if I claim to, this is a similar thing, if I claim to be able to contact the dead, I need to prove it. So that's very much like, was that Sagan Standard? some of these, like I said, overlap quite a bit.
Is there a 1-800 number you provide to contact the dead?
Well, I guess if they can charge, if I can charge enough for it. Didn't we at one point start offering meteor insurance, Tim? So
no doubt. Yeah. Sign up today for a 50% discount.
So we're asserting that we can insure you without evidence. Again, whatever. Anyway, don't apply these razors to our inane babbling. Okay. Next one. Let's move on to this one's just kind of silly, but you'll hear it, and you've probably heard it before. This is the duck test. If it looks like a duck,
yes,
swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, then it is probably a duck.
Except in certain cases of perhaps a witch trial.
I can say, or it's a platypus.
That's right.
So this one, I guess all of these, take them with, like I said, as a rule of thumb. It's so this is, I guess, about abductive reasoning and drawing the most likely conclusion given the evidence. So you want to be careful with this, because sometimes just because you see a certain set of facts and therefore you said, oh, it must be a duck, you might be missing some facts that do lead you to a different conclusion that, oh, actually that is a platypus. For example, if it's wearing a hat and there's Phineas and Ferb music going on, even if it is quacking like a duck, that is absolutely Perry. Phineas and Ferb. This is maybe going beyond the purview of what most of our listeners are familiar with. I'm familiar with it because I have children.
I'm a big Phineas and Ferb fan.
Yeah, Phineas and Ferb, wonderful.
As an adult who discovered Phineas and Ferb, as an adult, I recommend it to any of you. It's high quality content.
Quite. Okay, a few more of these. We have Popper's falsifiability. Boy, that's hard to say. Principle.
Is this related to Orville Redenbacher?
Falsifiability. That's how you say it. I was close.
Orville Redenbacher's falsifiability popcorn.
Karl Popper, not related to Mr. Redenbach, and no, it was also not. He did not produce popcorn. It is easy to obtain confirmations or verifications for nearly every theory if we look for confirmations. Every genuine test of a theory is an attempt to falsify it or refute it. So that's kind
of the foundational philosophy of science, right? The right. Null hypothesis. Okay.
Yep. You've got to. It must be falsifiable. So in order for something to be considered scientific, it needs to be falsifiable, and that's important. And you see these all over the time, all over the place. And I believe this was also one of these, one of the logical fallacies that we discussed. But you need the ability to be falsifiable. If it's not a falsifiable claim, then what are we doing here? But it does. The statement of it, I thought, was. It says it's easy to obtain confirmations or verifications if you look for confirmations, and that's where you get your confirmation bias going on. So even if it is a falsifiable theory, you want to go into any new theory that you're trying to adopt, not with looking for confirmation, but looking for falsifiability. You need to be able to say aliens, do aliens exist? If you go in trying to find reasons to believe that aliens exist, I'm sure you'll find something. But if you go in with the idea that, I need to see if I can falsify this, then you're going to go in as a skeptic, and science is inherently skeptical. So that's. Go ahead.
I'll provide a maybe more commonplace example. We do this a lot with our health, and how we feel. I've this cold has been going around, and I got it. And my friend says, "Hey, if you drink this such and such or take such and such product, it'll make clear that cold right up." And I've had the cold for a week now, and I'm just languishing. And my friend tells me this, and I say, "All right, I'll just pick some grapefruit juice. Okay, I'll start drinking a lot of grapefruit juice." And sure enough, within 5 days, my cold is gone. And so I say, "Ooh, that grapefruit juice really did the trick." Where I'm seeking to verify it rather than seeking to falsify it. And even though most colds run say between 1 and 2 weeks, and so I started taking the grapefruit juice 1 week in, and my cold cleared right up. Well, was it going to clear right up with or without the grapefruit juice? Yeah, most likely. So I've just verified something that I was looking to verify. So we'll see people, and sometimes we're driven to this by desperation. Well, nothing else works, so I'm going to try this, and maybe I don't even know if it'll work or not. But a lot of things that we seem to have proven as true only appear true because, as you say, we were seeking to verify.
Right. Yeah. And that is the case in a lot of things. I was looking recently at not to turn off any of our audience, but if you're familiar with multi-level marketing companies.
Wait, Carl, no, this might be a way for us to monetize. Let's leave this one alone.
You kind of get this mentality a lot is despite the fact that the product or whatever it is or even just the structure has proven to be kind of, well, very problematic. People want to hold to it because they've bought in some way, either monetarily or invested in it emotionally, and therefore, despite the fact it's been falsified, they cling to it, and that's I guess. Let's see. This is Popper actually had 7 rules about how to distinguish between science and pseudoscience, and one of them was these theories that are proven to be false, but then are upheld by people that admire it. You can always do that. You can try to find ways around the science, but you're doing it at the price of destroying the actual scientific nature of the principle, or in this case, a multi-level marketing company's actual viability is a structure, and a structure that actually ends up benefiting society and the people involved as a whole. So you need to be able to look at these things kind of in a dispassionate way. And so this is, like I said, this is a scientific. I don't know how many out there are religious. This is not. We're not discussing religious principles. This is a scientific take on logic. Once again, so okay.
Does this bring us to Newton's flaming sword?
I was going to get to Newton's flaming sword. Yes. Do you have that one looked up, Cameron? Do you want to tell us what Newton's flaming laser sword is?
Flaming laser sword. Yes. It must be Newton's flaming laser sword. If something cannot be settled by experiment, it is not worth debating, is what I have.
Yep. So Mike, also known as, the name Newton's flaming laser sword, I mean, talk about a cool name. It's like when on our quantum physics podcast, we talked about the Higgs boson, also known as the God particle. I mean, if you can give your thing a name like Newton's flaming laser sword or the God particle, you've won already. Like if that's adopted, yeah, I mean, you're already, the battle is won and you've succeeded. But also known as Alder's razor, much less cool. But Mike Alder, I guess, is the person, Australian mathematician. He coined the term Newton's flaming laser sword. That which cannot be settled by experiment is not worth debating. So, and that, unfortunately, very often in life and in social circumstances, we do debate something that cannot be settled by experiment. That is, if we stop debating all the things that cannot be settled by experiment, all of the sports conversations in the world would die tomorrow.
So would, if you think about it.
So would what, Cameron?
Politics.
Oh.
Well, if you think about it, actually, sports conversation, most of them can be resolved by experiment. The game is the experiment. Who wins,
Right, but I don't know how much you listen to sports talk radio, Tim. I may have that off on in the background frequently while I work, and they're no longer talking about games anymore. It's what about this player goes here? What happened if so and so did this? It's all of these hypotheticals, and these cannot be settled by experiment. I mean, I guess technically they could, but you can't go put such and such a player on such and such a team. Therefore, debating it is not worth doing it.
Well, so here's a question about Newton's flaming laser sword. Does he mean it can't be set? It's not worth debating if it can't be settled by an experiment, like if it's not the type of thing that could be settled by an experiment, or does he mean it's not worth debating if it can't be settled by an experiment that we can actually do to settle it? You see what I'm asking?
Not worth debating if you can't do an experiment to prove or
can't actually go out and do it. Okay.
Yeah. Be like,
right.
And we'll do this experiment and it'll show that I'm right. And then if I end up being wrong, you can be like, you just got laser sorted.
Right. I guess my point was that socially we discuss a lot of things that are not this scientific or logical conclusion of this razor. So, but yeah, he was discussing, let's see, there's this whole paragraph. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but essentially it says in a nutshell, you should generally only focus on problems that can be solved by a combination of experimentation and reasoning, and not just argumentation. If it's possible to perform an experiment to settle the matter, you should. So he said he came up with this when he was thinking about, as a young child, what would happen if an irresistible force acted on an immovable object. Right? Like, okay.
Caught between a rock and a windy place.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I don't know, Tim, if I don't think this is more on the scientific footing or the logical footing once again, as opposed to a social water cooler talk type of application of Newton's flaming laser sword. But yeah, it does mention that history, politics, those types of things. If you are debating something that you can't do anything to actually prove, then you're just debating for the sake of debate. And some people do that, right? That's even a thing in the world. There are debate teams out there. They're not actually trying to solve something. They're trying to get better at debate. But in the realm of science and logic, why debate something when you can't actually come to any type of useful conclusion?
Well, I think it should just be, we should really see if Tim can eat 15 hot dogs.
I'm willing to provide the experiment to laser sword this assumption if you will provide the hot dogs.
All right.
This does remind me, though, once again, of kind of the multiverse situation where, like, are there alternate universes and are there other versions of yourself? Like, okay, tell me how you're going to experiment on that, right? So should we really discuss things that cannot be experimented upon? Okay, maybe if you want to make a blockbuster movie, sure, go ahead. But if you're trying to come up with a law of physics, move along, please.
Mm-hmm.
All right, a couple more before we wrap up. We've got Grice's Razor. Pardons to Mr. Grice if that's not how you say your name. But Paul Grice said conversational implications are to be preferred over semantic context for linguistic explanations. wrap your head around that one. But this is it's a
I would,
sense of
I would take a stab at it. Don't go after what the speakers literally said, what he meant.
right, exactly. It's so often we do this for fun, right? We try to skewer someone on the literal meaning.
Take their words, take them out of context.
No, you over contextualize their
Okay,
meaning.
so it says this: most people are poor communicators and struggle to find just the right words and examples to express themselves. Even despite our best efforts, the words don't always come out right, or the way we intended them to. Sometimes people are also trying to express an idea they don't even know how to articulate. So you want to, another way I've read this, it says, conversational implications are to be preferred over semantic context for linguistic explanation. So conversational implications meaning try to figure it out in context as opposed to trying to semantically parse the words, if that makes sense. You don't want to pull, and this is something actually I see a lot in philosophy debates, is people really over parse and over semanticize. I'm not even sure that's a word. But they delve too deep. This is the Mines of Moria right here.
Would it be personalize?
Sure. But back to the Mines of Moria example here. You don't want to go so deep in the words, the specific words that they're saying, that you find the Balrog. You want to find the context of the things that are being said, so that you can actually understand what is going on, what is trying to be communicated. So that's Grice's razor. It's looking for the intent of the utterance as opposed to the literal text of the utterance. I would probably put the caveat on here that this is, as I was reading about this, I was thinking judicial law. The Supreme Court is supposed to take the Supreme Court of the United States. Like I said, we have a lot of people outside of the United States that listen to the podcast, but they're supposed to take the text of the Constitution and apply it, or are they supposed to take the meaning of the Constitution? Where this gets a bit tricky is, do you understand the meaning independent of the words or because of the words? And so that's it's this linguistic dance that we always do in life, is you're listening to the words, therefore you're getting the meaning, but you can't then say I get the meaning without listening to the words. So there is interplay here for sure. But Grice's razor is when I'm listening to so-and-so explain their logic, try to grasp the meaning as opposed to over parsing the words that they're trying to that they're using in explaining.
And again, the general idea that you give grace and benevolence to the people around you.
Or do you give Grice?
Grice, that's right.
Yes, exactly. And even if I don't think this is necessarily initially meant to be like a razor of like beneficence, this is a razor of just the best way to understand people, even in a utilitarian view, is just don't overly fasten on their on their eccentricities as opposed to just finding, oh yeah, this is what they mean. So
it is funny how tightly connected kindness and utilitarianism are. Kindness really is utilitarian.
It's true. Okay, I think I've got one more here that we wanted to discuss before we.
And I've got one more as well.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Do you really?
Yeah,
I might have to. Okay, so one other razor I wanted to hit on was Tarswell's razor, James Tarswell, where it says, where there is passion, the truth cannot be trusted. So that is the idea of high emotion leads to high bias. Science and the justice system hold that dispassion is the core of their intentions. So you need to be a dispassionate scientist. You need to be a dispassionate judge. If you are, you can. A zealot is only appropriate in religious senses, or maybe a salesperson. That's where you can, if you are a person of strong emotions, go get one of those types of employment jobs, some would call them. Tarswell's razor says when you're going to be working in logic and science, there cannot be a large amount of passion. So if you hear a scientist arguing passionately about their research, you have to ask yourself if they've gone beyond the realm of science. Because it's no longer the case that they are just stating the facts and letting the facts do the work. They feel like they are now an evangelist for their point of view, which is no longer a scientific point of view. And so in some cases, people have to wear a couple hats, and you need to both be the scientist and the evangelist. But I think that's often dangerous. You need to try to disambiguate those where you can, so the scientists are just scientists. They are trying to falsify ideas. They're trying to apply hypotheses and come up with theories. And that's also the case with judges. You don't want a judge that's super passionate. You want one that's very dispassionate, very by the book, and then if there's something wrong with the book, then somebody needs to fix that. So.
And I think we could say in a perfect world, that's how it should be. I think, I'm, for example, say a doctor, I'm trying to remember specific names, but the doctor who discovered, or one of the keys doctors in discovering hygiene, and he spent years trying to convince the scientific community of these hygienic practices, which would have lowered mortality in childbirth greatly. But he was, pushed to the side and derided and so forth. I can imagine a doctor like that, pursuing this his angle with passion. That doesn't mean that his science is bad or anything. But I see what you're saying, where there's always that you have to be wary of that, because passion can then blind you from further truth or understanding, right?
Yeah, I feel like the vaccine for what's the most common antibacterial shot? Not bacterial, it's penicillin. I feel like if it wasn't that one, it was one around the same time period that it was discovered, started being put to use, and then it didn't find quick traction, and so the scientists said, whatever, I'm going to move on. Where it was years later that they actually said, oh, actually, this has got incredible implications. So yes. But I guess the point is that if it's the scientist that becomes passionate about the subject, they then often start ignoring the science. So then if you are the guy that's giving the penicillin shot, and you, after being the evangelist about it as well, if the side effects start coming up and you don't want to talk about them because you're also the evangelist, then you've lost your credibility, right?
Yeah.
So you want the science to speak for itself, and so everyone needs a good salesman in their life that they can say, hey, look, I came up with this. Every scientist should go paired with a good salesman, I guess is my point. So get yourself a good salesman. But yeah, that's I think those are all the razors that I wanted to hit. So once again, let's see if I can go through these. It was Occams Razor. Then we talked a little bit about Occam's duct tape. The Hanlon's Razor, Sagan Standard, Hitchens Razor, Hume's Razor, which is also known as Hume's Guillotine, parenthetically, also cool. The duck test, Popper's falsifiability principle, Newton's flaming laser sword, Grice's razor, and then we finally wound up with Tarswell's razor. So hopefully those are interesting and useful. Tim, what were you saying?
So this is a kind of philosophical law that will help you with planning, kind of preparing for the future. It's Murphy's Law. If you guys know that one.
If something goes wrong, it can go wrong, it will go wrong.
If anything can go wrong, it will. That's right.
That's what I meant. Yes, that's the one. Yes. That's more that's not so much philosophical or scientific per se.
Well, speak for yourself. I've proved it right many times, and not just because I was looking to verify.
No, of course not. There's no confirmation bias and trying to find everything wrong in your life and trying to assign a cause, a one cause. I think we've got a bunch of razors that were being violated here. So, okay. Like I said, this has relevance with a lot of our previous podcasts, as far as, but in particular what am I going for, Tim?
For what? I've lost you.
Yeah, you have. The logical fallacy. That's it. Logical fallacy podcast. That's what we're going for. I'm really struggling at the end of these podcasts. That last podcast that we did, I tripped over a word for 30 seconds and didn't give up.
Don't worry, Carl. We attribute it to not to malice, but to incompetence.
Never give up, never surrender.
What was the word, if I may ask?
In the last podcast? Remember, I was trying to say that our Basics of Economics podcast was bringing the house down and a barn burner at the same time?
Oh, yes.
Bringing a barn burner down or something. I'm an amazing orator, essentially, is what we're saying here, which is why I have Learn It From a Layman is the name of our podcast.
That's right.
A couple things to mention before we sign off.
And I've got one thing to mention that's actually serious. So.
Okay. Cameron, what you were saying?
I was saying you're an amazing orator like Booker T.
I am certainly not along those lines, am I? But I give it my best, darn it. Tim, what do you want to mention?
I just wanted to speak when we talk about all these logical kind of razors and things, that they're a great lens through which to see the world more clearly. And as an English teacher and a person of faith, I just want to urge caution in how we apply these and suggest that we apply these with a bit of humility. I think sometimes we pick up these razors and stuff and we run around and we gleefully start chopping the world up and debunking and deducing and reducing the entire human experience. And I think that handle with care. Not that we shouldn't debunk something that's that's not true or is problematic. But I would also suggest, and again, I'm speaking from my perspective as a person of faith, that some things are just beyond our scientific and logical our ken. And so, our very existence and the deepest questions about the human life and human experience, God, and is God real in our relationship with God? I think we should tread with care, and recall that, things about experimentation and so forth, we can't experiment on the purpose of our existence or the meaning of life. And some people, I think, overzealously applying all of these kind of logical things will therefore dismiss, for example, religious thought on the purpose of life and the meaning of life and the existence of God and all these things. And I'm not going to, of course, tell all of you listeners out there, whether you should be a person of faith or an atheist or an agnostic or whatever. I think everyone should choose their path for themselves. But when you speak with others about these deepest things, you use these razors with care and with kindness, and beware of the fallacy of overzealously applying them to things that maybe are beyond the realm of experimentation anyways.
Yeah, I
Sorry,
think
I'm not
this.
sure if that's making sense, but
Yeah, for sure. I think my dad, who we have had on this podcast before, also, if you want to go back and listen to our college English episode, when I was a kid, gave me the book "The Limits of Science" by Peter Medawar, and he, I believe himself, was an atheist, or if he still is alive, then he is an atheist. But he said he claimed in the book, he said there are limits to science, and let's be aware of what those are, and leave to religious people religious topics. And so he, that's I guess the bound on these things, and that's why I wanted to state that and disambiguate here. These are scientific and logical laws. Not only they're not applied religiously, they also are not great water cooler talk. These are educational principles used appropriately. So put them in your toolbox. Apply them as need be. Don't go out there with a hammer and hit everything that looks like a nail. So, because not everything will end up being a nail, and you might just break something.
It's like you're told not to run with scissors. A razor's even sharper than scissors. So
ooh, we'll call that Cameron's razor sheath.
Cameron's razor?
Don't run with a razor.
Cameron's 4-blade Gillette razor.
I'm up to 6 plasma.
Right, I'm 4 blades. That's like 2 decades ago.
Mr. Dr. Barry actually wrote a column about razors and their evolution, that they'll start to look like the biplanes of the old days of going 6, 7.
Right.
Nice.
Okay, so as we're wrapping up, last thing I said in our last podcast, if you listen to that one, we are nearing the 100,000 download number for total downloads across our library, and our listener base is growing. So appreciative once again to everyone that's finding us and subscribing and or reviewing us and giving us nice reviews. So please continue. I think some of you may have noticed that we did get an ad that was not really of our doing, but we might leave it on. We'll see. So far it's made us almost 2 dimes. So let's just say we're not doing this for profit still, but yeah, we appreciate it. Let's see, India and the UK still. UK is pulled into the 2nd place, but Canada is coming up strong for 4th. So Canadians, that was the grade I was giving them. I wasn't trying to be Canadian. And then all across the United States, we are, we've got listeners in every state. So, and a lot in some states, California, my current home, grateful for the hundreds and hundreds and potentially thousands of people that listen to us here. So, like I said, hopefully if you have something that you want to say, let us hear it on Facebook, Learn from a Layman there, on Twitter, or on an email. Go to our website, learnfromalayman@podbean.com, and we'll be back again next episode.